My friend David sent me these wonderful old AR4Xs. The packing job versus the mail handlers did not, the mail handler potential for damage won out over the packing job's ability to protect. So one corner of each speaker was dented. This is the worst one. You can see the damage there. It's a little bit of separation of the miter joint and deformation of the wood. And I believe that this is not just veneer, although it's hard. I don't know that for sure. Here's the other damaged corner. It's not as bad, of course, but it is, the wood is deformed. Doesn't look like there's the same sort of separation of the miter joint. This one could probably be fixed mostly with sanding, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with how to fix this sort of thing, so I'm going to have to figure that out. First step is to remove the grill. Cutting knife or 5-in-1 tool, and there's a nice relatively sharp edge, and the rag, if I can, protect the wood, but try. Probably doesn't matter, but just in case it does, and never hurts to be in the habit of marking where things go, so I'm going to mark this grill that I just took off with the last 2 digits of the serial number for the speaker. Again, just in case it matters, or I decide that it matters at some point, that I need to get the right grill onto the right speaker. Where exactly to mark it, and how exactly to mark it, that's a good question. While I'm in here, let's give this a dusting. It's likely that as long as I'm in this, as long as I've opened it up, and if I'm ever going to do so, I think it's a good idea to do so, that I should refoam at least this speaker, or at least the woofer. I don't know if it's something that needs to be done. It might help if I clean it up a little bit. Oh, I don't know. It looks like there might be a bit of a crack in whatever this stuff is. Interesting, it doesn't necessarily look like it's actually foam, but I don't know. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. It looks old. It looks like it might be cracked right there. Now I'm going to get the other speaker clean a little bit. I'm pretty impressed with just how clean these are, given that the front grills probably haven't been taken off since they came from the factory. Yeah, these have not been kept in a dusty place, or the grills have been reasonably good at keeping the dust out, and or they haven't been stored on their backs. They've been stored upright so that dust doesn't tend to penetrate, settle into here. I'm not necessarily seeing any of the same sort of damage on this speaker that I did the other. Again, I don't know if it's actually even damaged, but yeah, I'm not seeing the same sort of question marks here. The next step then is to take out the screws that are holding the woofer in place. Of course, it's always a good idea to put whatever screws and things in a safe place. I keep these little baggies that electronics come in from DigiKey for just such these purposes. Next step, according to Audiokarma TMAD 40 Blue, it's his guide to this restoration that I'm following. I gotta pry the woofer out. I should have mentioned that in taking the screws out, important to be careful, especially as you get them loosened, not to push down too much with the screwdriver, because the nuts or whatever it is that it's threaded on the other side of the wood here, those nuts are just glued to the front, and you don't want those to come unglued. Of course, you also don't want to strip the screws. It was interesting to me how little force it took to turn the screws. Seemed mainly sort of just goopiness of whatever this stuff is that's sealing up the speaker. Mainly goopiness that was keeping the screws in place rather than, well, for example, they weren't glued in with Loctite or something like that. It took little force little torque to get them going. Necessary caution at this point is not to bust the wires that are connected to the woofer on the other side. You need to get the woofer out, but got to be careful about how far we pull it and how quickly and so on. I'm going to remove this putty, but you may not need to remove it, and it may be just fine, still able to do its work, so why mess with it? A big strip of putty stuck to the speaker here as well. So I brought these back into my office, my so-called bench, which is a desk. Because the next step is to desolder these wires from the speakers. The thing I noticed right away is just how different these two woofers look. The one on the right here, filthy, covered with a very fine dust, and the metal itself looks oxidized. The one on the left, shiny everywhere, no dust. I wonder what the source of the dust is. Is this a matter of the shroud being a better protector in one case than the other? Does it have something to do with that paper that's wrapping one of the magnets? Don't know. The next step is to remove this shroud cloth from each speaker and the rock wool behind the shroud. So the shroud cloth is apparently quite fragile, so there's that. And the rock wool behind it is nasty, you don't want it to touch your skin kind of stuff. So I've got the gloves, we've got paper bags, one for each stuffing. and got a respirator mask just in case there's a bunch of dust that comes up. And the speaker's been closed for 50 years, who knows, so respirator mask just in case. So now we've got the inside of the speaker all evacuated, and you see in each case right now, you can see the potentiometer or the pot, and that's the thing that we need to rehabilitate. You can also see in the right hand one, you can see the coil and the capacitor. The capacitor is the big flattish box thing underneath the coil. And figuring that's a big film capacitor of some sort, although, you can look that up. 20 microfarad, I'm assuming that's what MFD means. 50 volts. Similar capacitor in the other one. So now we need to take out the pots. So I'm going to take still photos of the wiring so that I'm sure how to get those back together. I want to talk through the wiring here. So that is one of the speaker terminals, and this, where this blue and the red wires go, is one of the speaker terminals. See, one of them goes straight to the red wire, straight to the woofer. The others, so green wire goes over to the left-hand terminal here on the pot, and then on the right-hand terminal, with two green wires come off. One goes to the capacitor, the other goes to the tweeter, and then the third terminal, yellow wire, goes to the tweeter. That's the same on both of these. It's a little bit harder to see on this one than the other one, but this one's easier to get on video right now. In order to disconnect that pot, we could snip the wires and then clean up the terminals with it out of the box, or you can desolder it while it's in the box. I really don't like the idea of snipping the wires. And so I'm going to see about desoldering them in the box. I've moved the blue and green, sorry, the blue and red wires out of the way, and taped them down with masking tape to keep those out of the way. And we'll see. I don't know. It may just not be feasible to get both, say, solder sucker and soldering iron in there at the same time. We'll see. I've been operating on the other one of these with the camera off for quite a while. Managed to get one wire disconnected. It's just kind of hopeless, what with the position and how well the wires were wrapped on there. So I'm really just going to have to cut it. I didn't want to, because those green wires, especially that green wire going from the terminal to the pot, is quite short. So I may need to replace all those wires, but I'm simply not going to be able to get that out without cutting. So, oh well, here goes. So now I need to go ahead and take the pots out, which means I have to undo these nuts on the outside back of the. That's interesting. Usually they're red. One of these is red, one's black. Anyway, I've got to take those nuts off. Alright, next step is to take these apart. We'll do that by just pulling off of this putty, the staple sort of thing underneath that. Pull that out with needle nose pliers. And once I get that out, I'll be able to pull it apart and see what we got. As I expected, these are pretty gunky inside, pretty corroded. See the nice green on there. And corrosion's also on this part here. So what we'll need to do is clean all that out, get rid of all that corrosion, and clean it up, and put it back together. After all that, we'll have to see. There's some of the metal that is just sort of pitted and gone on these things. So I've done what I can, and we will put them back together and see if I can get them to work. Alright, time to test them. The LCR meter. That's weird. So, it seems to be good for most of its range. Here we've got it turned all the way up or whatever, 15 ohms. And down. Down, it should. But there, and here we've got 3.3 ohms, and then we'll turn it a little bit further back, and then it jumps to nonsense mega ohms. Figure out what's up in there. Now here's the problem: is that the metal is actually missing. In both of these. There are places where the metal is just so, it's just pitted till it's gone. And other places where it's, I've tried plating that stuff, sort of replating it with solder, but it won't take solder. There's the other one. And so all this area just is no good. So you try something. I've got some copper tape, and maybe I can rebuild it just so that it'll work at least. Let's see. And that's got it. At least this one works perfectly. The other one I can't get to work reliably all the way at 0. One end or the other, whatever. This one, just fine. So just to be clear what I did, got this copper tape and taped it over the top and then cut around and also cut out the donut hole. And then put flux on there and solder, because without cutting out the donut hole and soldering on top, the tape doesn't make a good enough connection, so you don't get a connection. This way it works really well. Don't know how durable it'll be, but we'll see. She works. Just testing it out. Haven't re-stuffed it or sealed the woofer yet. I got the materials that I've been waiting for to complete the speaker restoration. So we'll be doing that. First thing will be to take the woofer back off and put in new capacitors. I got this duct seal putty to seal to replace the old putty sealing in the drivers. I figured also it would be good for putting in the new capacitors, keep them from vibrating, making noise. I figure there might be some benefit in redoing these surrounds. So these surrounds are cloth, then they're sealed with a butyl rubber sealant, and I figure that should be redone as long as I'm doing everything else, and because it looks like there's some faults in it. I think it's the other one that looks like there might be even a tear in it, but I'm pretty sure it's not a tear, it's just a defect. Anyway, that's going to involve nasty chemicals. I think what I'm going to do then is take the woofer off the wires again, so that I don't have to use the nasty chemicals around the nice wood cabinet, and also so that I can have access to the back of the surround, and maybe it might make sense there's going to be a couple of stages to it. One is to essentially try to use pure toluene to dissolve away the old sealant. And I want to be careful with that, not to get it all over everything, of course, not to get it on the speaker cabinet, not to get it inside, not to get it on the rest of the speaker, so it might make sense to do that upside down, in which case it also makes sense to, well, for those reasons it makes sense to go ahead and take the wires back off here. To do these speaker surrounds, I'll be using some materials that are rather hazardous and nasty. So, pure toluene, and that is in order to dissolve this butyl rubber sealant. So, after I use toluene to get off the old sealant, I'll be mixing this with the toluene to get a thin enough consistency to brush, say probably do that in this cup, and then I'll paint that on with a brush. I will be using a respirator mask, and specifically one that is, as it says here, recommended for use in paint spray, organic vapor, or pesticide applications. So this is a respirator that is useful not only for filtering out small particles, but also for nasty chemicals. My family's complaining that they're getting lightheaded upstairs, even though I'm in the basement and have the window open and the fan going. I'm going to have to move this stuff away from. Well, that was even more unpleasant than I thought it might be. Still don't seem to have gotten anywhere near all of the crap up on this one. Once it's done a little bit better, still some bits that wouldn't come out.
For 24/7 service and always free delivery and confidential packaging. Change your life for the better and have fun. Call Pharmacy Shop 24/7 to get generic versions of Viagra or Cialis for as little as $2 a pill, plus free discreet shipping.
800-4